The conference room at Meridian Financial buzzed with congratulations I didn't want to hear. My promotion to Chief Financial Officer should have felt like victory, but all I could think about was the text message burning a hole in my phone. Can't make your announcement tonight. Company party is mandatory. You understand, right? I understood plenty. Hazel had missed 3 of my career milestones this year, but never skipped a single event at Corven Industries. Her devotion to that place made my stomach turn. Nate, you coming to celebrate? My colleague Jennifer waved from across the room, holding up a champagne flute. Actually, I think I'll head over to Hazel's thing, I said, loosening my tie. The words tasted bitter. Support the wife, you know? The drive to the Hilton downtown took 20 minutes through rush hour traffic. I'd changed from my celebration suit into something more casual. Dark jeans and a button-down that Hazel bought me last Christmas. The irony wasn't lost on me. Corven Industries had rented the entire top-floor ballroom. Through floor-to-ceiling windows, the city sprawled out below us like a circuit board, all glittering lights and geometric patterns. I recognized most faces from previous company functions, ambitious young executives, seasoned managers, and the usual collection of spouses who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. I found Hazel near the bar, laughing at something her coworker Tessa was saying. She wore the red dress I'd complimented that morning, the one that made her look confident and untouchable. Her auburn hair was pulled back in that sleek style she reserved for important occasions. "There's my husband," she said when she spotted me, but her smile seemed forced. "How did your thing go?" "Fine," I said. "Got the promotion." "That's wonderful, honey." She kissed my cheek, but her attention was already drifting back to her conversation. Tessa was just telling me about the Singapore expansion project. I nodded and grabbed a beer from the bar, settling into observation mode. This was Hazel's world, not mine. These people talked about market penetration and quarterly projections with the fervor of religious zealots. I understood the language. My own career in financial compliance required it, but I'd never felt the passion. That's when I saw him. Elias Corven held court near the windows, surrounded by his usual circle of admirers. At 45, he had that polished executive look that screamed success, silver at his temples, expensive suit, confident posture. He caught my eye and raised his glass in acknowledgement. "Nate, glad you could make it." Elias approached with his trademark politician's smile. "Congratulations on the CFO position. Hazel told me all about it." "Thanks," I said, wondering when exactly that conversation had taken place. Hazel hadn't seemed particularly interested in the details when I'd mentioned the final interview process. "We should talk sometime about compliance consulting," Elias continued, always looking for expertise in that area. I was about to respond when the music changed to something slower, more intimate. The crowd began shifting, conversations breaking up as people moved toward the dance floor or found seats at the scattered cocktail tables. "Oh, this is my favorite song," Hazel said, appearing at Elias's side. She'd had a few drinks. I could tell by the slight flush in her cheeks and the way she gestured more dramatically than usual. "Mine too," Elias said, "though I'm afraid my wife abandoned me for the hotel spa. Something about needing to decompress after a long week." The comment struck me as odd. I'd met Mira Corven several times at these functions. She seemed like the type who endured social obligations rather than escaped from them. "Well, we can't let good music go to waste," Tessa chimed in. "Elias, you should dance with Hazel. She's been talking about wanting to dance all night." I watched this exchange with growing unease. There was something choreographed about it, like they'd rehearsed these lines. "I couldn't impose," Elias said, but he was already extending his hand toward my wife. "Don't be silly," Hazel said. "It's just dancing. Besides, Nate doesn't dance. Do you, honey?" The question hung in the air. She was right. I'd never been much of a dancer. But the way she said it, with that slight edge to her voice, made it sound like a character flaw rather than a simple preference. "Go ahead," I said, because what else could I say? Making a scene would only embarrass everyone involved. They moved toward the dance floor, and I found myself following at a distance, beer in hand. Other couples swayed to the music, lost in their own conversations and connections. Hazel and Elias moved together with an ease that surprised me. They seemed to anticipate each other's movements, like they'd done this before. They look good together, don't they? I turned to find Harper, the head of HR, standing beside me. She was watching the dance floor with an expression I couldn't quite read. "It's just dancing," I said. "Of course," Harper agreed, but something in her tone suggested otherwise. Elias is such a generous boss, always making sure his employees feel appreciated. The song ended, but instead of returning to where I stood, Hazel and Elias moved toward one of the cocktail tables. A group had gathered there, mostly Hazel's immediate colleagues and a few senior executives I recognized but didn't know personally. I approached slowly, catching fragments of conversation about the Singapore project, quarterly projections, and something about a client dinner next week. Hazel was animated, gesturing as she spoke about market analysis and growth opportunities. This was the version of my wife that I saw less and less at home, engaged, passionate, alive. Hazel's been invaluable on the expansion planning, Elias was saying to the group. I don't know what I'd do without her insights. Oh, stop, Hazel said, but she was glowing from the praise. You give me too much credit. Nonsense, Elias replied. Talent recognizes talent. The conversation continued around me, but I felt increasingly like an outsider looking in. These people shared inside jokes and references to meetings I'd never attended, projects I knew nothing about. Hazel fit seamlessly into their dynamic, while I stood on the periphery nursing my beer and checking my phone. That's when it happened. Someone had made a joke. I missed the setup while scrolling through emails, and everyone was laughing. In the midst of the laughter, Hazel, still giggling and slightly unsteady from the drinks, plopped down onto Elias's lap. Oh my goodness, she said through her laughter. I'm sorry, But she didn't get up immediately. Instead, she settled there for a moment, one arm draped casually around his shoulders for balance. The group thought it was hilarious. Tessa was practically crying with laughter. Harper had her phone out, probably taking pictures for the company's social media. Even some of the senior executives were chuckling and making comments about how Hazel was clearly the life of the party. But I wasn't laughing. I stood there, watching my wife sitting on another man's lap while a room full of people treated it like the most natural thing in the world. Elias had his hands positioned carefully, one on the arm of his chair, one hovering near her back as if to steady her. But there was something about his expression that made my chest tighten. He wasn't laughing like the others. He was looking at Hazel with an intensity that had nothing to do with humor. As a joke, Hazel was saying, finally starting to stand up. I sat on the boss's lap as a joke. How mortifying is that? But she didn't look mortified. She looked exhilarated. The moment stretched on longer than it should have. Even after she'd moved back to her own chair, the group continued to reference it, making comments about how Hazel was going to be the talk of the office on Monday, how Elias was lucky his wife wasn't there to see his groupie. I felt something cold and sharp settle in my stomach. Not anger exactly, but a kind of clarity that I hadn't experienced in months, maybe years. I set my beer down on the nearest table and walked over to where they were sitting. The conversation quieted as I approached. Having fun? I asked, and my voice sounded normal, conversational. Oh, Nate, Hazel said, her cheeks still flushed. Did you see my graceful moment? I practically attacked poor Elias. I saw, I said. Something in my tone must have registered because the laughter died away completely. The group was watching now, sensing a shift in the atmosphere. I reached down and twisted my wedding ring off my finger. The gold band caught the light from the chandelier overhead as I set it carefully on the cocktail table in front of Hazel. What are you doing? She asked, her voice suddenly sharp with alarm. Leaving, I said simply. I turned and walked away without another word. Behind me, I could hear Hazel calling my name, her voice rising above the music and general party noise. But I didn't stop. I didn't look back. The elevator seemed to take forever to arrive. When the doors finally opened, I stepped inside and jabbed the button for the lobby. As the doors began to close, I caught a glimpse of the party through the ballroom entrance. People clustered around the cocktail table, Hazel standing now, gesticulating as she spoke to Elias and the others. The elevator descended in silence, carrying me away from my wife's world and back towards something I couldn't yet name. I was halfway across the lobby when I heard footsteps behind me. Nate, wait. I turned to find Mira Corven approaching. Elias's wife was a striking woman in her late 30s, with dark hair and intelligent eyes that missed very little. She was wearing a simple black dress and carried herself with the kind of quiet confidence that came from years of navigating corporate politics as a CEO's spouse. Mira, I said, I thought you were at the spa. I was, she said, stopping a few feet away. But I came back early. I saw what happened up there. I'm sure it looked dramatic, I said, but it was just... Here. She held out her phone. I think you should see this. I stared at the device, not taking it. What is it? Text messages, she said quietly. Between your wife and my husband, going back about 18 months. The lobby suddenly felt very quiet, despite the usual hotel bustle around us. A group of businessmen walked past discussing dinner plans. The front desk clerk answered a phone call, normal life continuing while mine shifted on its axis. Why are you showing me this? I asked. Because, Mira said, I don't think either of us deserves to be made fools of. I took the phone. The message thread was extensive. scrolling back through months of communication. At first glance, it looked like typical work correspondence, meeting schedules, project updates, client information. But as I scrolled through more recent messages, the tone began to shift. Hazel. Working late again tonight. And won't even notice. Elias. His loss. Dinner tomorrow? The usual place? Hazel. Can't wait. These company parties are so much more fun when you're there. Elias. Especially when my wife skips them. More time to focus on what matters. The timestamps showed many of these conversations happening during my overnight shifts at the office, when I'd been pulling long hours to prepare for the CFO transition. While I'd been working to advance my career, our future, Hazel had been building something else entirely. How long have you known? I asked, handing the phone back. I started suspecting about 6 months ago, Mira said. Elias became very interested in attending events he used to complain about, started working late more often, taking calls in the other room. She paused. Tonight confirmed it. What do you plan to do? That depends, she said, on what you plan to do. I looked back toward the elevators, thinking about the scene I'd left behind. By now, Hazel would have spun some story about my dramatic exit. Stress from the new job, maybe, or my general antisocial tendencies. The group would nod sympathetically and move on to other topics. I need to think, I said. Of course. Mira reached into her purse and pulled out a business card. My personal number is on the back. If you decide you want to compare notes, call me. I took the card and slipped it into my pocket. Why are you doing this? Because, she said, I believe in consequences. I drove home through empty streets, my mind churning through 18 months of memories with new context. The late nights when Hazel claimed to be working on urgent projects, the weekend business calls she took in the other room, the gradual shift in our intimacy, all explained away by work stress and career pressures. It was as if everything had been slipping away, piece by piece, and I hadn't noticed until it was too late. The clues had always been there, subtle but clear in hindsight. Her detachment, her secretive behavior, but I had convinced myself it was just a phase. Now, everything was clear, and nothing about our life together made sense anymore. My phone buzzed constantly during the drive, text messages from Hazel that I didn't read and calls I didn't answer. I didn't need to hear her voice. I already knew what she'd say, and I wasn't ready to listen. By the time I pulled into our driveway, the notifications had stopped coming, as if she'd finally realized I wasn't going to engage. Our house sat dark and quiet in the suburban neighborhood we'd chosen 3 years ago for its good schools and family-friendly atmosphere. It had been our dream, a place where we imagined building a life, raising children, growing old together. We'd talked about filling those bedrooms with kids someday, once our careers stabilized and we felt ready for the next phase of life. Another conversation that apparently meant more to me than it ever had to her. I poured myself a whiskey and sat in my home office, staring at the framed photo on my desk. Hazel and me at our wedding 5 years ago, both of us grinning like we'd won the lottery. She'd looked radiant that day, absolutely certain about our future together. I wondered when that certainty had started to fade, and why I'd been the last to notice. Had I been so consumed by my own ambitions, my own responsibilities, that I failed to see the cracks forming beneath our feet? My laptop chimed with a new email notification. The sender was my own corporate account, but I hadn't sent anything since leaving the office that afternoon. I clicked it open and felt my stomach drop. It was my resignation letter from Meridian Financial, submitted to HR at 6:47 p.m. An hour before, I'd witnessed Hazel sitting on Elias's lap. An hour before, I'd walked out of that party. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. The letter was professional and brief, citing personal circumstances requiring immediate attention, and offering to complete any necessary transition work remotely. It was effective immediately. I hadn't written it, but someone with access to my corporate email account had. Someone who knew my writing style well enough to craft something that sounded authentically like my voice. Someone who had been playing me for a fool all along. My phone rang. Hazel's name appeared on the screen, but I let it go to voicemail. A few minutes later, I played back her message. Nate, what the hell was that tonight? You embarrassed me in front of my entire company. And now people are saying you sent some kind of resignation letter? Call me back. We need to talk about this. Her tone was more angry than concerned, more focused on her embarrassment than my state of mind. I deleted the message and poured another whiskey. It seemed like everything she cared about was her image, her career, and not the destruction she'd left in her wake. At 2 a.m., I heard Hazel's car in the driveway. I listened to her footsteps on the stairs, the bedroom door opening and closing. She didn't come looking for me in the office, and I didn't expect her to. She had already made her choice. The next morning, I woke up on the office couch with a stiff neck and the taste of regret in my mouth. Hazel was already gone. Her coffee mug sat in the sink, and a note on the counter informed me she'd be staying at her sister's place until you're ready to have a mature conversation about last night. I called in sick to Meridian, though technically I wasn't sure if I still worked there. Then I called Stanley Riley, my best friend from college and currently a private investigator specializing in corporate fraud cases. "Nate," Stan said when he answered. "Long time. What's going on?" "I need your help with something," I said. "Can you meet me for lunch?" Stan chose a diner on the outskirts of town, the kind of place where conversations could be held without interruption. He arrived wearing his usual uniform of jeans and a leather jacket, looking like he'd stepped out of a detective novel. At 40, Stan had the weathered face of someone who'd seen too much human nature and wasn't particularly surprised by any of it anymore. "You look terrible," he said, sliding into the booth across from me. "Thanks. That's exactly what I needed to hear." Stan ordered coffee and a burger while I stuck with coffee and tried to figure out where to begin. Finally, I told him everything: the party, the resignation letter, Mira's phone, the text messages. He listened without interrupting, occasionally taking notes on a small pad he pulled from his jacket pocket. "So," he said when I finished, "your wife is having an affair with her boss. Someone used your corporate email to submit a resignation letter, and the boss's wife wants to team up with you to expose them. That's the situation. And you want me to do what, exactly?" "Find out what else I don't know," I said. "If they've been planning this, there's got to be more. Financial records, travel receipts, something that shows the scope of what's been happening." Stan leaned back in his booth, studying me. "You sure you want to go down this road? Sometimes ignorance really is bliss." "I'm already down the road," I said. "Now I just want to know where it leads." "Okay. I'll need access to financial records, credit card statements, anything you can legally provide, and I'll need to talk to this Mira woman, get a sense of what she knows and what she's willing to share." I pulled out Mira's business card and slid it across the table. She said to call if I wanted to compare notes. "I'll reach out this afternoon," Stan said. "In the meantime, you need to think about what you want the end game to look like. Evidence is one thing, what you do with it is another." That afternoon, while I was trying to make sense of our joint financial records, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find two people in dark suits, a man and a woman, both carrying badges and serious expressions. "Mr. Brantor? I'm Agent Martinez with the Securities and Exchange Commission. This is Agent Johnson. We'd like to ask you a few questions about your employment at Meridian Financial." My chest tightened. "What kind of questions?" "May we come in?" Agent Martinez asked. I led them to the living room, my mind racing through possibilities. The SEC didn't make house calls unless something significant was happening. "Mr. Brantor," Agent Johnson began, "we're investigating potential securities violations involving Corven Industries. Your name has come up in connection with this investigation." "I don't work for Corven Industries," I said. "I work for Meridian Financial. Or I did until yesterday." "We're aware of your employment history," Agent Martinez said. "We're more interested in your personal connections to Corven Industries personnel." "You mean my wife?" "Your wife has had access to your work communications, correct? Email, documents, client information?" I thought about our shared home office, the times Hazel had used my laptop when hers was being repaired, the conversations we'd had about various clients and compliance issues. Nothing that should have been confidential, but in the right hands, even general information could be valuable. "Some access," I admitted. "Nothing that would violate confidentiality agreements." Agent Johnson consulted her notes. "We have evidence suggesting that information from your work communications may have been used to inform trading decisions at Corven Industries, specifically advanced knowledge of compliance investigations and regulatory changes." The pieces began falling into place with sickening clarity. Hazel hadn't just been having an affair, she'd been providing insider information, my work, my expertise, my reputation, all compromised for whatever she and Elias had been building together. "I need to speak with a lawyer," I said. "That's your right," Agent Martinez agreed. "But Mr. Brantor, if you've been an unwitting participant in this situation, cooperation with our investigation would be in your best interest." After they left, I sat in my living room staring at the business cards they'd given me. My career in financial compliance was probably over, regardless of the investigation's outcome. Even if I was cleared of wrongdoing, the association would follow me for years. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Mira. Your friend Stan called. Can we meet tonight? I have additional information you need to see." I typed back, "Where and when?" "Coffee shop on 5th Street, 8 p.m. Come alone." The coffee shop was nearly empty when I arrived, just a few students with laptops and a couple sharing a dessert in the corner. Mira sat at a table near the back, 2 cups already waiting. She looked different than she had at the hotel, less polished, more tired, but also more determined. "Thank you for coming," she said as I sat down. "Stan said you had more information." "I do." She slid a manila folder across the table. Medical records, financial statements, travel receipts, everything I could gather without breaking any laws. I opened the folder and began reading. The medical records were the first shock. Hazel had been claiming failed IVF treatments for the past year, explaining why we hadn't been able to have children. But according to the documents Mira had obtained, Hazel had never attended a single appointment at the fertility clinic she'd mentioned. There was no file, no treatment history, no failed attempts. "She's been lying about wanting children," I said. "It gets worse," Mira replied. "Look at the financial records." The bank statements showed a pattern of wire transfers from accounts I didn't recognize, totaling over $300,000 across the past year. The amounts corresponded with dates when I'd provided Hazel with information about upcoming compliance investigations at various firms. "She's been trading on insider information," I said. "And sharing the profits with my husband," Mira confirmed. "I found corresponding deposits in his personal account, the one he thinks I don't know about." The travel receipts were the final piece of evidence. Business trips that Hazel had mentioned in passing, conferences she'd claimed to attend, client meetings that required overnight stays. All of them corresponded with similar travel by Elias, often to the same cities on the same dates. "How long have you known about all of this?" I asked. "I started gathering evidence 6 months ago," Mira said, "but I needed to be thorough. Divorce attorneys are expensive, and I wanted to make sure I had everything I needed for a clean separation." "You're filing for divorce?" "I already have," she said. "Papers were served this morning while Elias was at the office. He should be finding out right about now." As if on cue, my phone rang. Hazel's name appeared on the screen. "Answer it," Mira said. "But put it on speaker." I accepted the call. "Hello, Hazel." "Nate, thank God. Something terrible is happening. Elias's wife has lost her mind. She's filing for divorce and making all these crazy accusations about..." "About what?" I asked. "About Elias and me having some kind of affair, which is completely ridiculous. I mean, we work together closely, but that's all it is. You know that, right?" I looked across the table at Mira, who was watching me with interest. "Do I?" I said. "Of course you do. You're my husband. You know I would never..." "Nate, you have to help me. This woman is trying to destroy both our careers over some paranoid fantasy." "What kind of help do you need?" "I need you to talk to her. Convince her that she's wrong about this. Maybe she'll listen to you." "Why would she listen to me?" "Because you're reasonable. Because you know the truth about our marriage, about my character. Nate, please. My job is on the line here." I ended the call without responding. "Interesting approach," Mira said. "Denying everything and asking you to defend her." "She's desperate," I said. "The SEC visited me today. They're investigating insider trading at Corven Industries." Mira's eyebrows rose. "How much do they know?" "Enough to connect Hazel to the information leaks. They think she used my work communications to provide advanced knowledge of compliance investigations." Which she did, I agreed. "The question is, what do we do now?" Mira leaned forward, her expression serious. "We make sure they face consequences for what they've done, both of them." "What did you have in mind?" "Your friend Stan mentioned you're considering divorce proceedings. I suggest we coordinate our efforts, share information, present a united front. Make it impossible for them to manipulate the narrative." I thought about Hazel's phone call, her assumption that I would automatically defend her despite the evidence, the casual way she dismissed Mira's accusations as paranoid fantasies, the complete absence of any acknowledgement that her behavior might have contributed to this situation. "What's the timeline?" I asked. "My divorce papers request an expedited hearing based on financial misconduct. With the SEC investigation, I expect that request to be granted, probably within the next 2 weeks." "And you want me to file as well?" "I want you to do whatever serves your best interests," Mira said. "But yes, I think coordinated filings would send a strong message about our credibility versus theirs." I closed the folder and looked around the coffee shop. The students were still typing away on their laptops, probably working on papers about literature or history or economics. Normal problems with normal solutions. I envied them. "There's something else," Mira said. "Something I haven't told you yet." "What?" "Your wife's divorce attorney. Do you know who she hired?" "No. Should I?" "Patricia Chen. Ring any bells?" I searched my memory and came up empty. "No." "She was Hazel's roommate in law school. They've stayed in touch over the years, very close friends. The implication hit me immediately. You think Hazel knew I was considering divorce before I made any moves? I think, Mira said, that your wife has been several steps ahead of you for quite some time. The resignation letter, the timing of her staying at her sister's house, the immediate hiring of an attorney she trusts completely. This isn't panic. This is execution of a plan. I felt something shift inside me, a hardening that I'd never experienced before. Not anger exactly, but a cold determination that surprised me with its intensity. In that case, I said, I think it's time I started planning too. The next morning, I called Jennifer Martinez, not the SEC agent, but the attorney Jennifer Martinez who'd handled my father's estate 3 years earlier. She agreed to see me that afternoon, and I spent the morning organizing every piece of evidence Mira and I had compiled. This is quite a situation, Jennifer said after reviewing the documents. The good news is that you have substantial evidence of financial misconduct and adultery. The challenging news is that your wife appears to have been preparing for this confrontation longer than you have. What do you mean? The resignation letter submitted from your corporate account suggests she's been planning to isolate you professionally. Staying at her sister's house immediately after the confrontation indicates she was ready for the relationship to end publicly. Hiring Patricia Chen means she has legal representation, who knows her personally, and will be highly motivated to protect her interests. So, what are my options? We file immediately, Jennifer said. Today, if possible. We request expedited proceedings based on the financial misconduct and the ongoing SEC investigation. We coordinate with Mrs. Corven's legal team to present a unified narrative about the affair and its financial implications. How long will it take? With this level of evidence and the federal investigation, probably 6 to 8 weeks for a final decree, maybe less if they don't contest the major issues. And if they do contest, Jennifer's expression grew serious. Then it becomes expensive and ugly, and we have to be prepared for them to attack your credibility in any way they can. Your career, your mental state, your role in the information leaks, everything becomes fair game. I signed the retainer agreement that afternoon and authorized Jennifer to file divorce papers immediately. Then I drove to Stan's office to check on his investigation progress. Stan's office occupied the second floor of a converted warehouse downtown, accessible by a narrow staircase that creaked with every step. The space itself was exactly what you'd expect from a private investigator. Cluttered desk, filing cabinets, a coffee maker that looked older than I was, and windows that needed cleaning. Good timing, Stan said when I walked in. I was just about to call you. What did you find? More than you're going to like, he said, gesturing for me to sit in the chair across from his desk. Your wife and her boss have been very busy. He opened a thick folder and began spreading out photographs, documents, and printed emails. First, the travel records. They've taken 7 trips together in the past 18 months, always to the same cities within a day of each other, always staying at hotels within walking distance of one another. The photographs showed Hazel and Elias at various restaurants, walking together through airport terminals, entering and leaving hotel lobbies. Nothing explicitly inappropriate, but the body language told a clear story of intimacy and familiarity. Second, the financial trail. The insider trading goes deeper than what Mira found. They've been using information from your work communications to trade not just stocks, but options and futures contracts. The total profit is probably closer to $500,000. $500,000? And growing. They're still actively trading based on information that appears to come from your professional contacts. Stan pulled out another set of documents. Third, and this is where it gets really interesting, they've been planning to leave their respective spouses for at least 6 months. How do you know that? Apartment hunting. They put down a deposit on a luxury condo downtown 3 months ago. The lease starts next month, and both their names are on it. I stared at the rental agreement, seeing my wife's signature next to Elias's on the bottom line. The apartment was expensive, more than Hazel and I had ever spent on housing, and certainly more than she could afford on her salary alone. There's more, Stan continued. They've opened joint bank accounts, applied for credit cards together, even looked into business licenses for some kind of consulting firm they want to start. A consulting firm? Financial compliance consulting, based on the preliminary paperwork. They're planning to monetize your expertise and reputation to build their new life together. The audacity of it was breathtaking. Not only had they been conducting an affair and engaging in insider trading, they'd been planning to profit from my professional reputation after destroying my marriage and career. What about the resignation letter? I asked. That was Hazel, Stan confirmed. She has access to your corporate email through the shared computer at home, and she's been monitoring your communications for months. The resignation was timed to coincide with their plan to go public with the relationship. So the scene at the party was probably intended to provoke exactly the reaction you had. They wanted you to leave dramatically so they could spin it as you having some kind of breakdown. Poor Hazel, married to an unstable man who couldn't handle her professional success. I felt that cold determination from the night before crystallizing into something harder and more focused. They hadn't just betrayed me, they'd orchestrated my humiliation and planned to profit from it. What else do you need to complete the investigation? I asked. A few more days to trace the financial records completely, and I want to verify the timeline on the apartment lease. But Nate, you need to be prepared for them to escalate this situation once they realize how much evidence we have. What kind of escalation? They're going to attack your credibility aggressively, your mental state, your role in the information leaks, maybe even your professional competence, and they're going to do it publicly, through social media and professional networks. As if summoned by his words, my phone buzzed with a notification from LinkedIn. Someone had tagged me in a post, and the preview showed Hazel's profile picture. I opened the app and felt my stomach clench. Hazel had posted a lengthy message about supporting spouses through career transitions and mental health challenges. She described her commitment to standing by me during my recent difficulties, and asked for understanding and privacy while we worked through this challenging time. The post had dozens of comments already, mostly from her professional network offering support and sympathy. Several people mentioned my erratic behavior at the company party and praised Hazel for her grace under pressure. She's already started, I said, showing Stan the post. Smart move, he admitted. She's controlling the narrative before you have a chance to present your side, making herself look like the supportive wife dealing with an unstable husband. How do I respond to this? You don't. Not yet. Responding defensively just makes you look more unstable. We need to wait until we have all the evidence organized, and then we present it all at once in a way that completely undermines her credibility. Stan was right, but watching the comments accumulate on Hazel's post was agonizing. People I'd known professionally for years were expressing sympathy for her situation and concern about my well-being. My reputation was being systematically dismantled while I sat powerless to defend myself. That evening, Mira called with an update on her situation. Elias hired Thomas Bradley, she said. Top-tier divorce attorney, very expensive, very aggressive. What does that mean for your case? It means he's planning to fight this rather than settle quietly. Bradley specializes in high-asset divorces, where one party tries to hide financial misconduct. The fact that Elias hired him suggests he thinks he can win. Can he? Not with the evidence we have, Mira said, but he can make it expensive and time-consuming, and he can try to destroy our credibility in the process. Hazel's already started on social media, I said, telling her about the LinkedIn post. I saw it, Mira said. Very calculated. She's positioning herself as the victim before anyone realizes she's the perpetrator. So, what do? We accelerate our timeline. I'm meeting with my attorney tomorrow to request an emergency hearing based on the ongoing financial misconduct. If we can get in front of a judge quickly, we can present our evidence before they have time to hide or destroy anything. Jennifer mentioned coordinating our legal strategies. Absolutely. The more unified our approach, the stronger our position. Two separate victims presenting consistent evidence is much more credible than either of us acting alone. After we ended the call, I sat in my empty house thinking about the life Hazel and I had built together. 5 years of marriage, 3 years in this house, countless conversations about our future together. All of it had been a lie for at least the past 18 months and possibly longer. My phone rang. Hazel's name appeared on the screen, and for a moment I considered not answering. But I was curious about her strategy now that the divorce papers had been filed. Hello, Hazel. Nate, thank goodness. I've been so worried about you. Have you seen what Mira Corven is doing? She's completely lost her mind, and now she's trying to drag us both down with her. What is she doing? She's filed these insane divorce papers claiming that Elias and I are having an affair. She's making up stories about financial misconduct and insider trading. It's completely delusional. Is it? Of course it is. Nate, you know me. You know I would never do anything like that. This woman is having some kind of breakdown, and she's trying to destroy innocent people to make herself feel better. What about the apartment lease? Silence on the other end of the line. What apartment lease? She finally asked. The luxury condo downtown. The one you and Elias put a deposit on 3 months ago. More silence. Nate, I don't know what you're talking about. Someone has obviously been feeding you false information. Maybe this private investigator you hired isn't as reliable as you think. You know about Stan? Of course I know. Patricia told me you hired someone to spy on me. It's hurtful, Nate. After everything we've been through together, you believed some stranger's paranoid fantasies instead of trusting your own wife. The gaslighting was masterful. Even knowing what I knew, having seen the evidence with my own eyes, part of me wanted to believe her version of events. The alternative, accepting that my marriage had been a lie for years, was almost too painful to process. I've seen the bank records, Hazel. The wire transfers, the trading profits, the travel receipts. I know about the insider information. Whatever you think you've seen, there's an innocent explanation. But we can't work through this if you won't talk to me. Come home, Nate. Let's sit down like adults and figure out what's really happening here. I am home. You know what I mean. Let's be in the same room, have an honest conversation without lawyers and private investigators and paranoid spouses poisoning the well. Where are you staying, Hazel? At Rebecca's. You know that. Show me. What? Show me that you're at your sister's house. Video call me right now. Another pause. This is ridiculous. I'm not going to play these paranoid games with you. Because you're not at Rebecca's house. You're at Elias's place, or the new apartment, or somewhere else entirely. I'm hanging up now. When you're ready to have a mature conversation, call me. I sat in the quiet house, thinking about Hazel's performance, the injured tone, the appeals to our history together, the subtle implications that I was being manipulated by unreliable sources. If I hadn't seen the evidence myself, I might have been convinced. But I had seen it, and now I understood that everything, the affair, the financial misconduct, the public humiliation, even this phone call, was part of a carefully orchestrated plan to destroy my life while building theirs. The cold determination I'd been feeling crystallized into something sharper and more focused. They wanted to play games with my reputation and my future? Fine. But they were about to discover that I was much better at this than they'd anticipated. I opened my laptop and began drafting an email to Jennifer Martinez. It was time to stop playing defense and start taking control of the narrative. The emergency hearing was scheduled for the following Thursday, giving us less than a week to organize our presentation. Jennifer worked with Mira's attorney to coordinate our evidence, while Stan continued digging for any additional information that might strengthen our position. On Tuesday morning, I received a call from Agent Martinez at the SEC. Mr. Brantor, we'd like you to come in for a formal interview regarding the Corven Industries investigation. When? This afternoon, if possible. And Mr. Brantor, you might want to bring an attorney. Jennifer accompanied me to the SEC offices downtown, a sterile government building that smelled like industrial carpet and bureaucratic efficiency. Agent Martinez and Agent Johnson led us to a small conference room equipped with recording equipment and a table covered with documents I recognized from my own investigation. Mr. Brantor, Agent Martinez began, we've completed our analysis of the trading patterns at Corven Industries, and we've identified specific instances where information from your professional communications appears to have been used to inform investment decisions. They showed me email threads between Hazel and me discussing upcoming compliance investigations, regulatory changes, and client situations. Next to each email was a corresponding trade executed by Elias or associated accounts, often within hours of my communication with Hazel. The pattern is quite clear, Agent Johnson said. Information flows from you to your wife, and from your wife to Mr. Corven, who then executes trades based on that advanced knowledge. My client had no knowledge of this misuse of information, Jennifer interjected. He's been fully cooperative with your investigation and has provided additional evidence of the financial misconduct. We appreciate that cooperation, Agent Martinez said. In fact, we'd like to discuss the possibility of Mr. Brantor's testimony in our case against Mr. Corven and Mrs. Brantor. The formal request to testify against my own wife felt surreal, like something pulled straight from the pages of a nightmare I couldn't wake from. But I agreed. The SEC's case would strengthen our divorce proceedings, and my cooperation would help establish that I was a victim rather than a participant in the scheme. It was a bitter pill to swallow, but it was the only way forward. I had been pulled into their web, deceived into believing a life that wasn't real, and now I was forced to untangle it piece by piece. After the SEC meeting, Jennifer and I returned to her office to review our strategy for Thursday's hearing. The air was thick with the weight of everything we just discussed, but Jennifer's focus remained sharp. Her professionalism was a lifeline in the chaos. The federal investigation gives us significant leverage, she said, her tone even, like we were discussing a business merger instead of a betrayal that had shattered my life. It establishes that the financial misconduct was real and substantial, and it positions you as a cooperating witness rather than a potential defendant. What should I expect from their side? I asked, needing something concrete to hold on to, something I could prepare for. They'll attack your credibility and try to portray you as a willing participant who's now trying to escape responsibility, she said, flipping through her notes. They'll probably claim that you're having some kind of mental breakdown and that your accusations are the result of paranoid delusions. Based on what evidence? I asked, feeling the tight knot of anger in my chest begin to unwind. The resignation letter, your dramatic exit from the company party, your hiring of a private investigator. They'll try to paint a picture of increasingly erratic behavior. Jennifer's words hit me like a slap, but I knew she was right. Every move I'd made had been twisted into something darker, something they could use against me. Wednesday evening, I was reviewing my testimony notes when my doorbell rang. I looked out the window and froze. There she was, Hazel, standing on my front porch, holding what appeared to be a bottle of wine. The sight of her made my pulse spike. I hadn't expected this. Not tonight. Not after everything. I opened the door but didn't invite her in. I wasn't sure I could trust myself to keep calm if she stepped over the threshold. "Hello, Nate," she said, offering a tentative smile. She held the wine out like some kind of olive branch. "I brought your favorite wine. I thought maybe we could talk." "About what?" I asked, my voice flat, my mind racing. "About this situation that's gotten so out of hand. About finding a way to work through our problems without destroying each other." Her voice held a note of something I couldn't quite place. Guilt, perhaps, or maybe something darker. I couldn't decide if she was being sincere or just trying to manipulate me one last time. She looked genuinely remorseful, and for a moment I almost believed the performance. The way her eyes met mine, the softness of her voice, everything felt so familiar, like the person I thought I knew was still there. But then I noticed the expensive handbag she was carrying, one I'd never seen before, and the subtle changes in her appearance that suggested someone else was funding her lifestyle. That someone was Elias. "Come in," I said, stepping aside, though I immediately regretted it. I had no idea what she was planning, but I wasn't going to stand on the doorstep with her, pretending like we were still playing nice. Hazel moved past me into the living room, setting the wine on the coffee table with a familiarity that was jarring. She settled onto the couch as if she still lived there, as if nothing had changed. It made my skin crawl. "I've missed this place," she said, looking around like she was remembering a time when things weren't so fractured. "I've missed us." "Have you?" The words escaped before I could stop them, bitter and accusing. "Have you really?" "Of course," Hazel said, her voice softening. "Nate, I know you're angry, and I understand why. But the things Mira Corven is saying about Elias and me, they're not true. Yes, we work closely together, and yes, maybe we've become closer friends than we should have. But an affair, insider trading, these accusations are destroying both our careers over what amounts to a misunderstanding." "Show me your phone," I said, the words cutting through the air between us like a knife. "What?" Hazel's voice faltered, the first crack in her composure. "Your phone. If there's nothing inappropriate between you and Elias, show me your text messages with him." Her face shifted, the mask slipping just a little. "That's an invasion of privacy. I'm not going to—" "Then show me the bank account where you've been depositing the trading profits." "What trading profits?" "Nate, you're talking like Mira's paranoid fantasies are established facts. There are no trading profits because there's no insider trading." Her voice wavered, and I could tell she was struggling to maintain control of the conversation. "Show me the apartment lease." "What apartment lease?" Hazel's eyes widened, a look of confusion crossing her face that quickly turned to annoyance. I pulled out my laptop and opened the folder of evidence Stan had compiled. The rental agreement was right on top, with both their signatures clearly visible. I turned the screen toward her, watching her expression carefully. "This apartment lease," I said, the words heavy with the weight of everything that had come before. Hazel stared at the document for a long moment, her eyes flicking between the paper and my face. I watched her calculate her options, the silence stretching as she weighed her next move. Finally, she closed the laptop with a soft click. "Okay," she said, her voice low, almost resigned. "Yes, Elias and I looked at an apartment together, but not for the reasons you think." "What reasons?" I asked, the question barely leaving my lips before the answer came. "We're starting a consulting business. We needed office space, and the apartment has a home office setup that would work perfectly for our initial operations." She spoke quickly, like she was trying to convince herself as much as me. "A consulting business." The words hung in the air, surreal. "Financial compliance consulting. We thought your expertise and reputation would be valuable assets for the company." She said it so casually, as though I should be flattered, as though I should just accept their plan to capitalize on everything I had worked for. The casual admission that they'd planned to monetize my professional reputation was stunning in its audacity. It was like they'd decided I was a tool they could use to advance their own selfish goals, and I'd been too blind to see it. "And you thought I'd be interested in this business partnership?" I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper of disbelief. "We were going to talk to you about it after we got the initial setup completed. We wanted to present you with a complete business plan rather than just an idea. Her words were smooth, rehearsed, but the lie was transparent. While conducting an affair behind my back. The words tasted like ash in my mouth. We're not having an affair, Hazel insisted, but her voice lacked conviction. We're business partners who've become close friends. Maybe too close, but nothing inappropriate has happened between us. Her denial was as empty as her words. I opened the laptop again and showed her the photographs Stan had taken. Hazel and Elias entering and leaving hotels together, sharing intimate dinners, walking hand in hand through airport terminals. The pictures were a damning collection of their betrayal. Nothing inappropriate, I repeated, my voice cold as ice. Hazel looked at the photographs for a long time, and when she finally spoke, her voice was different, harder, more calculating. Fine, she said. Yes, Elias and I are involved. Yes, we've been planning a future together. But Nate, our marriage has been over for years. We've been living like roommates, going through the motions because it was easier than dealing with the reality that we'd grown apart. So you decided to have an affair and commit securities fraud instead of having an honest conversation with your husband? The securities fraud is Mira's invention. We never used inside information for trading. Any profits we made came from legitimate investment strategies based on publicly available information. The SEC disagrees. That stopped her cold. What do you mean? They're filing charges against you and Elias next week. Insider trading, securities fraud, conspiracy. They have email records, trading patterns, financial transfers, everything they need to prove you've been using information from my work communications to execute profitable trades. Hazel's face went pale. You're lying. I testified yesterday. Gave them everything I knew about your access to my professional communications and the timeline of your trading activity. You testified against me? I testified about what happened. The fact that it incriminates you isn't my problem. Hazel stood up abruptly, her mask of remorse completely gone now. You bastard, she said. You self-righteous, vindictive bastard. Do you have any idea what you've done? You've destroyed my career, my future, everything I've worked for. I didn't destroy anything. You did that when you decided to betray our marriage and commit federal crimes. Our marriage was already over. I was just trying to build something better from the wreckage. By stealing from me. By using resources that were available to me as your wife. That information was as much mine as yours. The legal and ethical ignorance of that statement was breathtaking, but it revealed something important about how Hazel viewed our relationship. In her mind, my career and reputation were community property that she could exploit for her own benefit. Get out, I said. Gladly. But Nate, this isn't over. If you think I'm going to quietly accept being destroyed by your vindictive revenge fantasy, you're mistaken. I'll fight this, and I'll win, and when I do, you'll be the one whose reputation is ruined. We'll see. After she left, I called Jennifer to report the conversation. She admitted to the affair and the business planning, I told her, but she's still denying the insider trading. That's her prerogative, Jennifer said, but it won't matter much once the SEC files formal charges. The federal case will overwhelm anything her divorce attorney tries to argue. She threatened to fight back aggressively. I expected that. But Nate, she's in a very weak position now. The evidence against her is overwhelming, she's facing federal charges, and her credibility is shot. Whatever she tries to do, we'll be ready for it. Thursday morning arrived gray and rainy, matching my mood as I prepared for the emergency hearing. Jennifer had warned me that family court could be unpredictable, but she was confident that our evidence would speak for itself. The courthouse was an imposing brick building downtown, with high ceilings and the kind of formal atmosphere that made every conversation feel consequential. Mira was already there when I arrived, sitting with her attorney and looking composed despite everything she was going through. "How are you holding up?" I asked. "Better than I expected," she said. "There's something liberating about finally taking action instead of just enduring the situation." Hazel and Elias arrived together, which struck me as a tactical error. They were accompanied by their respective attorneys, Patricia Chen, who looked exactly like the aggressive advocate I'd expected, and Thomas Bradley, whose expensive suit and confident demeanor suggested he was used to winning. Judge Patricia Williams called the hearing to order promptly at 9 a.m. She was a woman in her 50s with graying hair and the no-nonsense demeanor of someone who'd seen every possible variation of human relationship drama. "This is an emergency hearing regarding the divorce petitions filed by Mira Corven and Nathan Brantor," she began. "I understand there are allegations of financial misconduct and adultery that require immediate attention." Mira's attorney went first, presenting a clear timeline of the affair supported by text messages, travel records, and financial documents. The evidence was damning. 18 months of deception, hundreds of thousands of dollars in trading profits, and a systematic plan to abandon their respective spouses while building a new life together. When it was my turn, Jennifer presented our evidence with clinical precision. The SEC investigation, the insider trading patterns, the apartment lease, the business planning documents. Everything that demonstrated not just an affair, but a comprehensive scheme to exploit my professional reputation while destroying my marriage. Your Honor, Jennifer concluded, Mr. Brantor has been the victim of a coordinated campaign of deception and financial exploitation. His wife used her access to his professional communications to commit federal crimes, while simultaneously planning to abandon their marriage and profit from his reputation through a consulting business he knew nothing about. Patricia Chen's response was exactly what Jennifer had predicted. She argued that I was having a mental breakdown triggered by career stress and that my accusations were the product of paranoid delusions encouraged by Mira Corven's own marital problems. Mr. Brantor's behavior has become increasingly erratic, she argued. The dramatic resignation from his job, the hiring of a private investigator, the conspiracy theories about insider trading, these are the actions of someone who's lost touch with reality. But Thomas Bradley's defense of Elias was even more aggressive. He claimed that Mira was a vindictive spouse who'd manufactured evidence to support false accusations, and that the relationship between Elias and Hazel was purely professional despite what might appear to be personal intimacy. Mrs. Corven has presented a carefully curated selection of communications and financial records designed to support a predetermined narrative, Bradley argued. But the complete picture tells a different story, one of professional collaboration that has been deliberately mischaracterized by a spouse seeking revenge for perceived emotional neglect. Judge Williams listened to all the arguments without interruption, occasionally asking clarifying questions about specific pieces of evidence. When the presentations were complete, she reviewed the documents for several minutes before speaking. The evidence presented today paints a clear picture of an extramarital relationship between Mrs. Brantor and Mr. Corven that has been ongoing for at least 18 months, she said. The financial records suggest a pattern of trading activity that corresponds closely with information Mr. Brantor shared with his wife about his professional activities. She paused, looking directly at Hazel and Elias. More troubling is the evidence of systematic planning for a future together, while maintaining the deception of their respective marriages. The apartment lease, the business planning documents, and the financial arrangements all suggest a level of coordination that goes far beyond a simple extramarital affair. Patricia Chen tried to object, but Judge Williams continued. However, the most significant factor in my decision is the ongoing federal investigation by the Securities and Exchange Commission. The court cannot ignore the fact that federal agents have found sufficient evidence to pursue criminal charges against both Mrs. Brantor and Mr. Corven. She turned to address the attorneys directly. I am granting both divorce petitions and ordering expedited proceedings. Given the evidence of financial misconduct, I am also ordering that all joint assets be frozen pending a complete forensic accounting. Mrs. Brantor and Mr. Corven are prohibited from disposing of any assets or making any financial transfers without court approval. The ruling was everything we could have hoped for. Hazel's face was pale with shock, while Elias whispered urgently with his attorney. They'd expected to control the narrative and minimize the consequences, but Judge Williams had seen through their strategy completely. As we left the courthouse, Mira and I walked together toward the parking garage. "How does it feel?" she asked. "Like justice," I said. Finally. But even as I said it, I knew this was just the beginning. The federal charges were still pending, the divorce proceedings would take weeks to finalize, and Hazel had made it clear that she intended to fight back aggressively. The real confrontation was still coming. The SEC announced the formal charges on Monday morning. The press release was clinical and precise: securities fraud, insider trading, and conspiracy charges against Hazel Brantor and Elias Corven, with potential prison sentences of up to 20 years each. By Tuesday, the story had been picked up by every major financial news outlet. Corven Industries' stock price plummeted, and the company's board announced that Elias had been terminated immediately. Hazel's LinkedIn post about supporting spouses through mental health challenges took on an ironic tone as comments flooded in from people who'd followed the news coverage. Stan called me Wednesday morning with an update that changed everything. "You need to see this," he said. "Can you meet me at my office?" I found him waiting with a thick folder and an expression I'd never seen before, part excitement, part concern. "What is it?" I asked. "I've been monitoring their communications since the hearing," he said. "Legally, through sources I can't reveal. But Nate, they're planning something." He opened the folder to reveal printed emails and text messages between Hazel and Elias, along with communications involving several other people I didn't recognize. They're not accepting the situation, Stan continued. They're planning to flee the country before the federal charges are formally filed. Flee where? Singapore. They've been in contact with someone there who can help them establish new identities and avoid extradition. The plan is to leave this weekend before the court can freeze their international accounts. I read through the communications, feeling my anger crystallize into something colder and more focused. Even facing federal charges and public disgrace, they were still trying to escape consequences for their actions. There's more, Stan said. They're planning to take as much money as they can access, including funds from accounts that should be frozen under the court order. Can we stop them? We can try, but we need to move fast, and we need to be smart about it. I called Jennifer immediately and explained the situation. She contacted the federal prosecutors, who assured us they would expedite the formal filing of charges and issue warrants for Hazel and Elias's arrest. But, the prosecutor warned, if they're planning to leave this weekend, we might not have the paperwork processed in time to stop them at the airport. That evening, Mira called with her own intelligence. Elias cleaned out his home office today, she said. Took all his computers, files, anything that might contain evidence. He thinks I don't know about the storage unit he rented, but I followed him there. What's your plan? I'm going to make sure he doesn't make it to that plane, she said, and something in her tone made me think she'd moved beyond seeking justice through official channels. Mira, we can't do anything illegal. It'll compromise the entire case. I'm not planning to do anything illegal, she said, but I am planning to make sure they face consequences for what they've done. Friday afternoon, Stan called with the final piece of intelligence we needed. They're leaving tomorrow night, he said. Flight to Singapore at 11:30 p.m. They're meeting at Elias's house at 8 p.m. to finalize their preparations. Are you sure? I'm sure. And Nate, they're planning to celebrate. They think they've won. That evening, I sat in my empty house thinking about the past month. 4 weeks ago, I'd been a successful financial compliance officer with a stable marriage and a promising future. Now I was divorced, unemployed, and watching my ex-wife prepare to flee the country with her lover after destroying my reputation and career. But I wasn't the same person who'd walked out of that company party. The betrayal had changed me, hardened me, given me a clarity of purpose I'd never experienced before. Hazel and Elias had underestimated me from the beginning, treating me like a passive victim who would accept whatever they chose to do to him. They were about to discover how wrong they'd been. I called Mira. I have an idea, I said, but it's going to require perfect timing and absolute commitment. I'm listening. They think they're going to escape consequences and start a new life together. I think we should give them exactly what they want and make sure the whole world watches them get it. Saturday evening, I drove to the construction site on the outskirts of downtown where the city was building a new convention center. The project had been stalled for months due to permit issues, leaving behind a maze of concrete foundations, steel frameworks, and heavy machinery. Stan was already there, along with the equipment he'd acquired through contacts I didn't ask about. Mira arrived 10 minutes later, carrying a briefcase that contained the final pieces of evidence we'd need. Are you sure about this? She asked. They've spent 18 months planning to destroy our lives and escape consequences, I said. I think it's time they learned what real consequences look like. At 8:15 p.m., we were in position. Stan had confirmed that Hazel and Elias were at his house, finalizing their preparations for the flight. According to the communications he'd intercepted, they planned to leave for the airport at 10 p.m., giving themselves plenty of time for international departure procedures. At 8:45, I sent Hazel a text message from an untraceable phone. I know about the Singapore plan. Meet me at the convention center construction site if you want to discuss terms. Come alone. 5 minutes later, I sent a similar message to Elias from a different number. Hazel is in trouble. Meet at the construction site downtown. Don't call the police. At 9:30, we heard the first car approaching. Through the darkness, I could see Hazel's sedan navigating the rough access road that led to the construction site. She parked near the main gate and sat in her car for several minutes, probably trying to decide whether this was a trap. Finally, she got out and began walking toward the central area of the site, where temporary lighting cast harsh shadows across the concrete foundations and steel beams. The whole place felt like a stage set for something darker than any of us had imagined when it had first been built. The shadows seemed to stretch endlessly, giving the scene an almost ominous feeling. There was a sense of finality in the air, as if everything was about to be revealed. Everything was about to be torn down. Nate, she called. Her voice echoed against the empty buildings, sharp and questioning. Are you here? I stepped out from behind a concrete barrier, staying in the shadows where she couldn't see me clearly, the dim light making my movements feel more like those of a ghost than a man. My heart beat in my chest, the tension so thick I could taste it in the back of my throat. I'm here, I said, keeping my voice low but firm. "What do you want?" Her words were sharp, filled with frustration, but I could also hear the undercurrent of uncertainty beneath her cool exterior. "I want to understand," I said, moving closer but staying in the shadows. "I want to understand how you could do this to me, to us." I wasn't sure if it was the question itself that was tearing me apart, or the answer I already knew was coming. "There is no us anymore, Nate. There hasn't been for a long time." Her voice was colder now, final. The truth in her words stung, but it was nothing compared to what had come before. "So you decided to destroy my career and steal my money instead of just asking for a divorce?" I asked, stepping into her space a little more, my anger beginning to seep through. "I didn't steal anything," Hazel replied, her tone defensive. "I used resources that were available to me to build a better future." "With Elias," I added, my voice bitter. "With someone who appreciates me, someone who sees my potential instead of taking me for granted." She said it so casually, as if this was just a normal explanation, as if what we had, what we were, hadn't been a lie from the start. The second car arrived while she was speaking. Elias's BMW pulled up next to Hazel's sedan, its headlights cutting through the darkness like a predator searching for prey. I watched him get out, his movements cautious, scanning the area nervously as if he knew something was off, but wasn't entirely sure what. "Hazel?" he called, his voice loud in the stillness of the night. "What's going on?" "I don't know," she replied, her voice too calm, too rehearsed. "Nate wanted to meet." Elias approached cautiously, his eyes flicking to every shadow as he walked, scanning for any signs of danger. When he spotted me, I could see his posture shift into something more aggressive, his shoulders squared, his steps quicker now, his face hardening into a mask of defiance. "What do you want, Brantor?" he demanded, his voice tight with tension. "I want you to explain to me how you thought this was going to work," I said, stepping into the light so they could both see me clearly. The moment I stepped forward, it felt like the air itself changed. There was no turning back now. "Did you really think you could destroy my life and just walk away?" "Your life was already destroyed," Elias said with cold finality. "Your career was going nowhere, your marriage was a sham, and your wife was wasted on someone who couldn't appreciate what he had." "So you decided to take her," I said, my voice dropping lower, colder. "I decided to offer her something better than what she had," Elias shot back, his eyes flashing with a mix of arrogance and anger. "And the insider trading was just a bonus?" I asked, my voice rising as the weight of everything hit me at once. "There was no insider trading," Hazel said quickly, but her voice lacked conviction. The words felt hollow, even to her. "We made legitimate investments based on publicly available information." "The SEC disagrees," I said, a hint of satisfaction creeping into my words. "The SEC is wrong," Elias said, brushing off the accusation with a wave of his hand. I pulled out my phone and activated the recording app that Stan had set up. The screen lit up, and the red circle blinked ominously, capturing every moment, every word. "So you're denying that you used information from my professional communications to execute profitable trades?" I asked, watching them closely, my eyes narrowing. "I'm denying that we did anything illegal," Elias repeated, his tone dismissive. "And you're denying that you planned to flee to Singapore to avoid federal prosecution?" I asked, the question hanging in the air like a bomb ready to detonate. The moment stretched on, the weight of my words sinking in. I could see them exchanging glances, trying to decide how much I actually knew, how much they could still control. It was clear they hadn't anticipated how far I would go, how deep the rabbit hole went. "We're not fleeing," Hazel finally said, her voice defensive. "We're relocating for business opportunities." "What business opportunities?" I pressed, my eyes hardening. "The consulting firm we discussed," Elias chimed in, trying to steer the conversation away from the truth. "There are clients in Asia who are interested in our expertise." "Your expertise in securities fraud?" I asked, my words laced with sarcasm. "Our expertise in financial compliance and regulatory analysis," Elias corrected, as if that would make the lie sound more convincing. "Services that are in high demand in emerging markets." I looked at these two people who had systematically destroyed my life while planning to profit from my professional reputation, and I felt the last remnants of any sympathy or regret disappear. They were cold, calculating, and shameless. "Stan," I called into the darkness. "Are you getting all this?" Stan emerged from behind a piece of heavy machinery carrying a professional video camera that had been recording the entire conversation. His presence made everything feel more real, more undeniable. "Every word," he confirmed, his voice steady. Hazel's face went pale. "You're recording this?" "I'm documenting it," I said, "for the federal prosecutors, for the divorce proceedings, and for anyone else who might be interested in the truth about what you've done." This is entrapment, Elias spat, his voice harsh. Anything we've said here won't be admissible in court. Maybe not, I agreed. But it'll be very interesting to the court of public opinion. Mira stepped out from her own hiding place, carrying the briefcase of evidence. She moved with purpose, a calm authority that made her presence feel like an inevitable force. "Hello, darling," she said to Elias, her words laced with venom. "Enjoying your last night of freedom?" "Mira, what are you doing here?" Elias demanded, his voice tinged with panic. "Making sure you face consequences for what you've done," she said simply. "Both of you." She opened the briefcase and began pulling out documents. Bank statements, trading records, travel receipts, communications, photographs. All the evidence of their 18-month campaign of deception and fraud laid bare for the first time. "This is everything," she said, addressing the camera directly. "Every lie, every theft, every betrayal. All documented and verified and ready for public consumption." "You can't do this," Hazel said, but her voice was shaking now. "This is harassment. This is justice," I interrupted. "You wanted to destroy my reputation and steal my money? Fine. But you're going to face the consequences publicly, completely, and permanently." Stan had been setting up additional equipment while we talked, and now the entire scene was being broadcast live through multiple cameras and streaming platforms. The construction site was lit up like a television studio, with every detail visible to anyone who cared to watch. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, addressing the cameras directly, "I'd like you to meet my ex-wife Hazel Brantor and her lover Elias Corven. They're currently under federal investigation for securities fraud and insider trading, and they were planning to flee the country tonight to avoid prosecution." "You're insane," Elias said, but he was backing away from the cameras now, trying to get out of the light. "Am I? Or am I just someone who refuses to be victimized quietly?" I turned back to the cameras. These two people spent 18 months systematically destroying my marriage, my career, and my reputation while stealing hundreds of thousands of dollars through illegal trading schemes. They thought they could escape consequences by fleeing to Singapore tonight. Hazel was crying now, but whether from genuine remorse or fear of exposure, I couldn't tell. "Nate, please," she said. "Don't do this. We can work something out. We can what? Give me back the 18 months of my life you stole, repair the reputation you destroyed, restore the trust you betrayed. We can try to make things right. You had 18 months to make things right. You chose to make them worse instead." The sound of sirens began echoing across the construction site. Stan had called the police and federal agents, reporting that the subjects of an active investigation were attempting to flee the jurisdiction. "And now," I said to the cameras, "you get to face the consequences you tried so hard to avoid." The first police car arrived as Hazel and Elias were trying to reach their vehicles. The officers, briefed by federal agents about the outstanding warrants, moved quickly to detain both of them. "Hazel Brantor and Elias Corven," the lead officer announced. "You're under arrest for securities fraud, insider trading, and conspiracy." As they were handcuffed and placed in separate police cars, I felt a sense of completion that I hadn't experienced since this whole nightmare began. They'd thought they were smart enough to destroy my life and escape consequences. They'd been wrong. The live stream continued as the police cars drove away, carrying them toward a future that looked very different from the one they'd planned. The comments and reactions were pouring in from viewers who'd witnessed the entire confrontation, and the story was already being picked up by news outlets across the country. "How do you feel?" Mira asked as we watched the taillights disappear into the distance. "Like myself again," I said, for the first time in months. Stan was already packing up the equipment, but the damage was done. The recording would be evidence in the federal case. The live stream had been watched by thousands of people, and the story would follow Hazel and Elias for the rest of their lives. "What now?" Mira asked. "Now we go home," I said, "and we start building something better from what's left." As we drove away from the construction site, I thought about the person I'd been 4 weeks ago. Naive, trusting, willing to accept whatever life handed him. That person was gone, replaced by someone harder and more realistic, but also more honest about what he was willing to accept and what he was willing to fight for. Hazel and Elias had taught me valuable lessons about consequences, about the price of underestimating people, and about the difference between being a victim and being defeated. I was grateful for the education, even if I wouldn't recommend the curriculum to anyone else. The city lights spread out ahead of us as we drove toward whatever came next. Behind us, the construction site sat empty and dark, waiting for someone to build something new where the old foundations had been torn away. It seemed like an appropriate metaphor for everything that had happened and everything that was still to come.